meditation of my heart be to the greater honor and glory of God. Amen. So, in today's gospel reading, we have a rabbinic debate over Sabbath and Sabbath law and what is considered work. Now, Sabbath or Shabbat is, we think of it as rest, but technically it's ceasing work. And so, in the book of Genesis, we hear that God, on the seventh day, He ceased from creating. He ceased His work. That creating equals work. But also that uncreating is also work as well. In the book of Exodus, when Moses goes up on the mountain and he's given the 10 Commandments, we all know that one of those commandments is that to keep the Sabbath holy. But at that time, what God was saying to the people, they were in the process of building the tabernacle that they would carry around for the next 40 years and throughout the wilderness. And so he was saying, that to work on the tabernacle, do this building, this creating, recreating, this construction work on 6 days, but on that seventh day, don't work. And then we also know that the man in the wilderness, so you can go out and you can gather that for 6 days, and on that 6th day you gather it for 2 days, but don't because that's working. So don't do that. That if you think you get 2 days work on that 6th day, you don't need it. You don't have to worry about it. So there are 39 activities in this that fall under this idea of not working or Sabbath. And of course, then the Pharisees took those 39 and made them ridiculous. And we'll kind of get into that. So here's the 39: carrying, burning, extinguishing. Some of these are kind of the opposite. Finishing, writing, no writing. Erasing. So if you do write something, if you erase, you've done, you've sinned twice. No cooking, no washing, sewing, tearing, knotting, or restraining. This is tying knots. Or untying, or unbinding. And these two are about kind of alleviating a burden. Shaping, plowing, planting, reaping, harvesting, threshing, winnowing, selecting, sifting, grinding, kneading, and this is combining, combing, spinning, dyeing, chain stitching, warping, weaving, unraveling. So if you make a mistake in your weaving, if you're sinning by weaving and you unravel it, again, that you've committed 2 sins. Building, demolishing, trapping, shearing, slaughtering, skinning, tanning, smoothing, and marking. And like I said, the Pharisees took that and they blew it way out of proportion. Like if you happen to have a fire going and you have a toothpick or something, and you throw that toothpick into the fire, that's work. And so you can see. Now, though, there is a caveat in this, in that you can save a life on the Sabbath. So that's not considered work. And there's a mandate to alleviate the suffering of an animal. Not alleviate the suffering of another human being, because that would be considered work. So in this sense, animals are more important than people are. So what laws did Jesus break? Well, because he healed this woman, he untied, he unbound her, from her restraints. He alleviated her burden. He took that away from her. And this was kind of a stretch, but he healed on the Sabbath. But you can heal on the Sabbath, but you can't do it. You can't like mix medicines and things like that, because that falls under that grinding and putting together. So this woman, she has this condition, and she comes to Jesus. She's had it for 18 years, and it says that she's had this spirit for 18 years, this evil spirit or demonic spirit. And it's not, this is one case where it says it's not caused by sin or a curse, but that, could easily be associated with that, because if you're blessed and you're healthy, then the opposite is if you're unhealthy, then you're cursed. So what Jesus did was he set this woman free from her bondage. And this is the second week in a row. I apologize. I'm going to use a Greek word, but it's important. The Greek word used here is deo, which means tied up, bound, chained, or restrained like a prisoner. So she's been a prisoner of Satan for 18 long years. 18 long years. Jesus makes this point, 18 long years. So she's set free from her bondage. Then he calls her a daughter of Abraham. And that's code. Because then the people that hear that, the daughter of Abraham, they typically think sons of Abraham. But the children of Abraham were those that were freed from their bondage in Egypt. And God did that work of freeing them, along with the help from Moses and Aaron and others. So this woman, she's unbound. She's given the freedom, like the freedom given to the Hebrews, the Israelites, to praise God through Jesus Christ. And I find it interesting in the book of Moses that when Moses goes to Pharaoh and he asks for the people to be set free, he says, I want them to be set free so that they can go and worship their God. That where they're unable to, even though they are, they're worshiping their God in bondage. So the question that I have for us this morning to think about is, how are we bound? What are the things in our life that are binding us and keeping us from freedom, from living our life, an abundant life that Jesus wants us to live? And is it somebody else that's keeping you bound? Is it your work that's keeping you bound? The amount of work that you do, or what is it in your life? Is it an addiction, or is it depression, anxiety, stress? I could go on and on and on and on. Is it somebody else that's putting this, that's binding you up, or but you're allowing yourself to be bound? What baggage are you carrying around that you have? Jesus said, come to me, my burden is light, my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. And so what do we have that we're carrying around? I think about COVID, and that what is it that we have allowed ourselves to be bound by? Now, granted, we had all these things that we were told that we had to do, but what of that are we still carrying around? What things that are binding us still in the midst of trying to somewhat live our life in the midst of this threat that's probably we may have for the rest of our life? are we going to live bound by the fear of that? And that's another huge one that binds us, is fear. That's individually what among us is binding us and keeping us set free to worship Jesus and to live a life that Jesus wants us to live. But I also ask the same question of the church, and specifically of this church and this congregation. What are the things that we are binding us, that we are allowing ourselves to be bound by? And there are probably a number of things, but I think the most important one is that we are allowing ourselves, I think, to be bound by the past. I don't know how often I've heard people lament the fact that we used to do things this way, and we can't do them that way anymore. Or even since COVID, and I found myself saying, boy, I want us to get back to normal. I want us to, I want us to do things like we did in the olden days, 2019. The before, yeah. And that we can't go back. And I want you to think about driving a car, think about when you look forward, you have this huge window to look out. But to look back, you have these little mirrors. And there's a reason that you need to keep focused on moving forward and not what's behind you. And then again, the fears that we as individuals may have, what are the fears that we have in the church that are keeping us bound? Because we can't always live in the past, that we have to keep moving forward, but adapting along the way. And we have to be assured that with each step forward we take, that Jesus is taking that step with us. So I think it's important for us individually to think about, what do we need to unbind ourselves? What burdens do we need to lay aside? And then also as a church, what are the things that are keeping us bound and keeping us from moving forward? And to get rid of that idea of that if we're not doing what we did in the past, that somehow we're failing. That's just not the case. That if anything, if we unbind ourselves from the past and the fears of moving forward, that we have so many opportunities ahead